right. Hello and welcome. I am here with Hans Decoz, and Hans has been here before talking about numerology, but in this episode, we are going to be talking about something a little bit different, something that is near and dear to Hans as far as the great mysteries of life. It's a book that Hans has wrote, and he is here to shed light on his book, which is available on Amazon, called What is Life? I will leave a link below as well, but we are going to go a little bit deeper into a subject that can sometimes be confusing. And this is part of Hans's journey that he's going to share with us. So Hans in 1971, Hans was introduced to a particular meditation practice and has been on a lifelong journey of understanding and unraveling some of the complexities of life. And we're going to go into this here with Hans. And thank you, first of all, Hans, for being here. And I'm really looking forward to our discussion.
Thank you, Tara. Thank you for having me.
Yes. And this is wonderful. So as I mentioned, you were on it was podcast slash YouTube before, talking about numerology, and that's how I've gotten to know you, was coming across your website. And this is actually quite an exciting, I feel, opportunity to go a bit deeper into not numerology, but into the depths of some of these mysterious aspects of our being that requires a lot of contemplation and a lot of time to understand and to explore the depths, and it only can really come from our own personal practice. So you have quite a lot of experience here, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation. And first of all, just to start this conversation out, I want to go back into how this all started. So I do remember in our last episode that when you and I spoke, and it probably was a year and a half ago, I think it was quite some time ago, and you talked about this journey to India that you had, and I'm assuming that's where this has all started, correct?
Kind of. I went to India like a lot of people back then. In part, actually, my main motivation was a search of, what is this life all about? Why am I here? Back then, in the early 70s and the 60s, it was not uncommon for people to be heavily involved in that question. And I was under the impression that I would find the answers by going east and going to India. And, that turned out, I had a great time. It was a fantastic trip. I never regretted a moment of it, but it didn't give me the answers that I was looking for. But I did meet someone, and as a result of that, was initiated, let's just call it that, and that was in 1971. And I have practiced that meditation ever since. To me, I have always had the sense that we are really underestimating the importance of life as far as what it is. It is in this little book, what life is. I'm stating that, for example, to realize and accept that life is a presence may well be the greatest challenge to the mind or the imagination. And I know that sounds strange, because you can look around and you see life everywhere. It's pretty obvious. But that is because we look at life forms and say, okay, that is life. But we don't really see the life within. And that question is what this little book is all about. What is life? And I'm not asking that question as I want to analyze it. I don't want to know, I want to know why it is, why we are alive, what it is that is inside of us. When you die, everything is there. You have your body, there's still blood, everything is still there, but something leaves. And it's a funny thing that science doesn't really touch that subject at all. They don't touch it. It's the elephant in the lab, is what I call it. You know, I mean, undoubtedly, it's the most important thing in our lives is life. So, what is it made of? Why don't they? I mean, if the life that resides inside of you and is the reason that you are alive, if it is made of particles, science would have found it a long time ago. If it is made of energy, science would be manipulating it, would be working with it. But it's never there. It's about, why is there, I mean, they know obviously everything about life being in action, about life forms. They can keep people alive, a long time, even when they are dying to get out of there, you know. But they don't know what it is. There was actually, I just read a few weeks ago, a physicist who explained that they go into smaller and smaller and smaller particles, and then they realize they're not particles, they're waves, they're particles and waves, and it just gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and then at the end there's nothing. And that was this physicist's statement was what that was, in the end there's nothing. And I want to say no. That's life. There's life. Science has it completely upside down, and I love science. I'm a big fan of science, but science will say, well, life came to this planet 4 billion years ago. It started with an amoeba. All the requirements were there. The water was there, the oxygen, and so life came here. But it is actually the other way around. Life exists and creates everything it needs to manifest. And if you start looking at it from that direction, completely the opposite direction, everything changes. Everything changes. When you realize that life, that you are basically swimming in it, that this whole universe is swimming in it, that life is the source, the creation, the creator of basically everything, you start looking at things differently. So,
and in the book, you wrote down that your book is about 5 words and a few other things. And the 5 that you listed: life, death, eternity, visible, and invisible. So you said the first word is the most confusing. The second is the least appreciated, which is death. The third most terrifying, which is eternity. The fourth, too often misunderstood, which is visible. And the fifth, ever ignored. So do you want to go into these 5 and break them down a little bit?
Yeah. Here's my book. Let me go to the appropriate page, because life is confusing. Is a very confusing subject, because there are so many uses for the word life. When you say, for a biologist, he'll look at something crawling on the ground and he'll say, there's life. But that's not life. That's a life form. When you think about your life, same thing. You think about basically the period that you have been alive, the trajectory, the things that have happened to you. That's your life, right? But we have a real problem thinking about life separate from life forms. Okay? People may say, life force, that's a popular one, right? But that's basically like giving an attribute to life. It's not life. Okay? We talk about soul, we talk about spirit, but religion gives names to all these things. God, the Father, all these religions have different ways of expressing it, when in fact what they are talking about is the life inside of a human being. So that's why life is very confusing. death is underappreciated because, when you're talking about, I mean, what would you want? What's the alternative? You stay alive, and even if you don't really get older, you stay alive. You stay alive for how long? For 1 million years, for 10 million years, for 100 million years, for 1 trillion years. I mean, it's no. I, I mean, we should be grateful that, at a certain point, the disk is wiped clean and you can start over or whatever happens. I don't know what happens. I haven't been, can't remember. I'll find out when I die. So, I mean, the alternative, if there was no death, is much worse. And that's also what I meant with eternity. Like if you go, eternity is very scary. I mean, if you, like, let's say, okay, I'm maybe touching right now, but let's say that, you go to heaven, right? And you're going to stay there for eternity. That's a long time. It's a long time. It's 1,000 years, 10,000 years, 100,000 years, 1,000,000 years, 1,000,000,000,000 years, 1,000,000,000,000 times 1,000,000,000 years, because we are talking eternity. It's either eternity or what. That's really scary. Okay, so I think that when that is what you're looking for, you might want to rethink that. And then visible and invisible. Okay, so everything that is visible we can relate to. We can draw it, paint it, talk about it, study it, and science has done that. And but then and with visible, I mean everything: gamma rays, particles, radio waves, gravity, because you can weigh it and you can measure it. I mean everything that's visible. But then there's invisible, and the only thing, no, two things really. Invisible is life. Life is invisible, which is why science has not been able to touch it. They can clone a sheep or whatever, and then they could say, look, we created life. Well, no, they didn't create life. They created, the requirements for life to step in and take over. But they don't have a syringe that has life in it, and they can put it. They don't know what life is. Life is invisible, not only to us. All we see is life forms. We don't see life itself. We just see life forms. But it's also invisible to all these fancy instruments. Anything. There's no instrument that has ever been able to capture life, ever. I mean, you can, you talk to doctors, whatever, people who deal with life and death all the time, understand supposedly everything about life, and they have a patient hooked up to all kinds of equipment to keep them alive, and they say, yeah, see, there's life. It's measuring symptoms of life. It's not measuring life. It's not showing life. It's just showing symptoms of life. And this is a funny thing that scientists don't really, I'm surprised they don't really, they discovered black holes, not because they saw black holes, but because the celestial bodies around black holes were reacting in a certain way, were behaving in a certain way, that they said, oh, the only explanation for that is a black hole, which they had already, I guess, theoretical physics figured out. So life is the same thing. Why you look at a body and it's alive, and then something happens and it's no longer alive. Nothing changed. The body, it didn't. You can put it on a scale. It didn't lose even the tiniest little bit of, weight. What is it made of? What is it made of? Is it particles? Is it energy? It's not energy. It's not particles. It cannot be measured. The only instrument that can connect with life, can touch life, can experience and feel it, is you as a human being when you go inside, which is what all the all the holy books talk about. You go inside. Yeah, it's Khalil Gibran and Rumi, and all these people who have been that we have books of that talk about this experience and call it all kinds of different names, spirit, whatever. That's what they did. They went inside and touched life and realized what it was. And that's the only thing. It's beautiful. It's a poetic beauty that is just wonderful. That I know for a fact. Well, my fact, which might be a relative fact. I know that science will never be able to capture life on any kind of instrument. They will be able to capture symptoms of life, say that that thing is alive or that thing is not alive or whatever. They'll be able to do that, but they will never be able to capture life and say this is what it is. But a human being can without any instruments by going inside, if they find that way, if they find the way.
And so, what would be a couple of examples of invisible? What would you be able to share as far as maybe putting that word or that term into context for people to understand what the invisible is?
Well, like I said earlier, there's really two things that are invisible: life and love. And I think it's easier to understand what invisible means when you consider it, by looking at love, right? Because you can't see love either. You can't see it. You can see expressions of love. You can see love happening. You can see love being expressed. You can see love in the eyes of a mother and a child. You can see love, but you see expressions of love. You don't actually see, lightning bolts or anything like that, except in cartoons, of course. But, it's invisible, and it's the same thing with life. Everything we see that we call life is a reflection of life. It's life in action. It's a life form. It's life expressing. I'm alive. You can see me. You're alive. That ant is alive. The elephant is alive. You don't see the life that's inside of that, and that's why earlier on I said to realize and accept that life is a presence may well be the greatest challenge to the mind and the imagination. That is true. It's just incredibly hard to recognize and think and contemplate and accept that, that looking at life as a presence, as a reality. If we did, if anyone, then that would be like right there, the first and most important thing. I'm going to need to find that. Okay. So, it's the Holy Grail, but it is invisible.
And what about manifestation? I'm assuming that would fall into the invisible, the as above, so below, for example, or the art of transmutation. Part of it is in the seen, in the practical, in the visible form, and then part of it is in the unseen, in the invisible form, where it requires a great deal of trust and being in the present to understand what's actually taking shape.
Right. So all of these are reflections of life in action. Mm-hmm. This is just really hard. That's why I mentioned in the beginning, it's really confusing because your mind keeps tripping up and going to life in a form that you can recognize, like a living creature or it's very hard to just sit back and accept that life is an actual presence that you cannot see with any instrument, but you can go inside and find it there.
Yeah. Yes, and that's our society. I've mentioned it a few times in other videos, other contexts about how we're so geared or we're so used to making sense of everything when part of life, I feel that's the beauty of it, doesn't need to be made sense of in the way that we're used to, because we're thinking of the mind. Mm-hmm.
That's why, I mean, when you look at that little booklet first, what life is, uh, it might seem like I'm trying to explain what life is, but I don't really. There's no way you're ever gonna. There's no way you can ever express it. There's no way you can ever find it. You cannot speak the Tao. You cannot speak the word. You cannot speak the holy name. You can't. The only thing you can do is build a certain amount of excitement. And to me, I mean, uh, I think that uh, it should be on the front burner of everybody's list of priorities. What is my life? What is that inside of me? What is that is keeping me alive? What is that? That should be, and it's not. People live their lives, I remember when I was 11 years old, 10, 11 years old, I was born in Amsterdam. I lived in Amsterdam, and I would be walking the street and looking at these adults, with their coats and their briefcases, and just be like, why don't they stop and look at each other and ask, what is this all about? What am I doing here? What is this? Because to me, that seemed to be like a real, logical thing. Like,
Yeah.
there you are. This is really strange. This is really, really strange. I mean, if you would be an atheist, then uh, and there's no God or nothing. If you, people who have a religion, they have it easy. Okay, well, there's God, and He created everything, and that's it. Answer. That's all done. If you're an atheist, you don't have that. I'm not an atheist. I was sure as hell was an atheist when I was young, but uh, that makes no sense either, because then nothing should exist. If you want to apply logic to this creation, nothing should exist. Nothing. Not even one single atom. It makes no sense. Okay. So what? I mean, you just need to know. You need to go and find. And that is kind of what the reason I wrote the book is. I'm just hoping that some people might just say, pay more attention to, you know, the big questions. It's too often shoved aside as a cliche. It's not a cliche. That's not a cliche. You know, to be serious about that is not a cliche.
And what has this done for your life going into these areas of inquiry and discovery and feeling and sensing?
I don't want to think about the alternative. I don't want to think about what my life would have been like without it. I really don't. There's no greater joy, there's no greater happiness than touching on that, than finding some of that. There's just there's nothing better. There's nothing. I mean, talk about rich. To be able to, lose yourself in that, and then and discover and learn or be taught or shown. There's just nothing. There's absolutely nothing on this planet that comes even close to that. And it's not like, oh, I walk around all day like, I'm so happy, I'm so happy, so happy. No, it's not like that. It's inside. It's inside.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, life. I mean, life. I mean, if you, I mean, people go to war, because of different gods or other reasons. They, you know, literally every bad thing, every problem on this planet, war, poverty, name it, everyone, everyone is directly related to the fact that people do not appreciate life to the extent that it should be appreciated.
Right.
Okay. If you know life, if you have touched the life inside, I mean, it's everywhere. You can't, you know, you can't, you can't go to war. You can't shoot. You can't watch your neighbor be hungry. You just can't,
Hmm.
you know.
Yeah.
I mean, if people really knew what life was, yeah, it'd be a paradise. We'd be living in paradise. The whole planet would be heaven.
So what are you hoping for readers to gain when they read your book?
Just a desire to know more, to need, that's it. That's it. I don't have answers. I don't have answers in it. I just talk about it as trying to, I mean, it's something that uh, it did something to me, and why not share it?
Okay, and then how about there's an area in your book called Our Blind Spot. Would you like to touch on that and explain this area a little bit more?
Yeah. Well, let me read a little bit of that. I
Mhm.
think that so. Our blind spot. What is life made of? Religion, science, philosophy, medicine. The question is never asked. It appears that we have a blind spot. Are we unable to think about life outside the context of life forms? That's it. That's it. Okay. That's the blind spot. That's the elephant in the lab. Why is it not? I mean, they are spending billions on finding smaller and smaller and smaller particles. And I think that maybe they think one day they'll find life, or they find, would they ever find a particle that and say, oh, that particle, that's life. That's what's inside of us. That's what keeps us alive. We found life. It's not going to happen, but I don't even think that that's what they're looking for, because they don't know how to ask the question. They don't know how to ask the question. Okay. It's that subtle. It's that confusing. They talk about life 100 different ways, but they never talk about it as an actual presence that somehow has escaped them. They've studied everything, everything. There's literally nothing they haven't studied. Okay. They don't even know how to ask the question, to start studying that. They don't know where to look. Where are you going to look? You're going to wait for somebody who's going to die in the next 2 minutes and then stand around him with all kinds of cameras and measuring instruments and all that. Say, oh, what's going to happen? Okay.
Yeah, maybe some things are better left not better left unknown.
Exactly.
Better left for mystery and for us to find it in our own way, on our own path.
And that's what I meant earlier with, to me, it's poetic.
Mhm.
It's just poetic that science has instruments that can measure and study literally everything
Mhm.
except life. On the other hand, you can acquaint yourself with the reality of life. You can touch it, you can experience it without instruments. So, yeah, it's pure magic.
It is. It is. I feel more scientists are starting to believe in a greater concept, one that they can't quite see and define, but I feel a lot of their studies or a lot of their methods for uncovering these truths are taking them kind of to the same place, that there is something bigger, there is something greater that maybe science can't exactly prove fully. But I feel that some scientists are becoming a bit more open to
Yeah,
bigger
and
answers.
I forget who it was. One of the, I don't know, find me, somebody else, and a physicist who said, when you start studying science, you lose your belief in God quickly.
Hmm.
But when you get farther into science, deep into science, then you find him back.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah.
So, and that kind of makes sense. Of course it
Yeah.
makes sense. I mean, they're just things that can't be explained in any way. And, when we can't explain something, we're going to call it God. We've been doing that forever.
Mhm.
But I really think we should stop calling it God and call it life,
Yeah.
because that is what it is. It's life.
Okay.
Don't call it soul. Don't call it spirit. Don't call it the Father. Don't call it life.
Mhm.
If you start thinking of it as life in that way, things change. Things change. You can't go to war with another country because they have a different God, because life is life.
Yeah, exactly. And at the very beginning of the book, before we wrap up, I want to go back to the very, very start of the book. And you have I believe it says, there is not enough ink and paper to express my gratitude towards PR. Who is PR?
Ramravat.
Okay. That was the
That,
person who you got your initiation through, I'm
right,
assuming.
right. And yeah,
Yeah.
but like I said, it's everybody's personal venture, or it
Mhm.
should be.
Mhm.
Should be.
Beautiful.
Find your way. Find your way. Just let that desire grow. The desire to know, desire to find it. Let that grow. It's going to be the best thing you'll ever do. It's the only thing you'll never ever regret spending time on, ever. Everything else is window washing. You know, I'm sorry, that was not the correct expression. But window dressing is what I meant.
Mhm.
Everything else, your career, your money, your love life, your everything. Then it all comes and goes. It's.
Do you have any tips for those watching on how to explore their deeper selves and the origin of life, meditation perhaps, or any kind of simple tips or exercises you could offer?
No, I'm just the only tip I can give is just be conscious of that desire. If you have that desire, be conscious of the fact that that's what you want, and don't and just give it attention, pay it attention, feed it like a seed, because that desire is what's going to get you. Nothing else. Nothing else. I mean, I grew up, reading Hesse and you know trying to find answers. Yeah, some of it, but even if they didn't give me the answers, they fed my desire. They fed my desire to know. That's
So,
it.
so it's having the desire, it's having the
The desire.
inquiry to, and then life will find you, or you'll stumble upon the right person, or life will
You'll
just
find.
move in that
You'll
direction.
find the way.
Hmm.
You'll find the way.
Yeah, perfect. That's beautiful. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we conclude?
No, I really appreciate you having me. I hope it made sense to some people. I don't know. I mean, just take it serious. Don't think of it as a cliche. Don't wipe it aside. Don't think. Just let it grow. Let the desire to know, to experience, to find. Let the desire grow, and then everything else will follow.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. Well, thank you, Hans. It's always a pleasure connecting with you. It was really great
And
to hear more about your own experience and delving into a little deeper side of ourselves. So I'll leave a link below in the description box for people to find your book. And again, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom here.
Thank you, Tara.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.